welcoming you to another session on managing anxiety. So before that, the session is organized by IYS. So IYS is ISKCON Youth Services of Chennai Temple Girls Forum. And we have a separate group on WhatsApp and in Telegram. The links for those would be shared. So if you would like to know more updates, more information about any future events or sessions, requesting you to join. The links will be shared in the chat window. So if any of you are new, then you can log in. Okay, fine. So, yes, IYS lessons, managing anxiety part 2. All right. So, all right. So we'll quickly start off with, I think there has been a long gap, so somehow I was also not feeling well. So because of that, we'll kind of roughly first recap what we saw in the first session, and then we'll proceed with today's session. So next slide. Okay. Yes. So first we started off with seeing what is anxiety. So what is anxiety? Those of you who attended the previous session, quickly, you can type in the chat window. So what is anxiety? Depression, sadness? No. Feeling low? Okay, so all these feelings, feeling depressed or feeling sad, they can be associated with anxiety. So someone who is anxious, it can be comorbid with it. So someone who's anxious can also feel sad, can also feel low. Yes, Akriti, brilliant. So a feeling of dread, feeling uneasy. And to put it very simply, we saw it as fear of unknown, fear of uncertainty. So there is always that vague sense of apprehension that something bad or something unpleasant may happen. And a person who's anxious will have several suspicions. They'll have so many what ifs. What if the situation happens? What if I have to go on stage and I have to present, and then people give me judgmental looks, and then they ask some twisted questions which I am not able to answer, and I am put there in a very awkward situation where I am not able to take up any questions, where I feel helpless. So so many what if situations, so that builds up your anxiety. So basically that sense of apprehension that something bad may happen. So what happens is you imagine different possible dangers in your mind. So that is what anxiety comprises of. Next, we saw some of the physiological symptoms of anxiety. So the physiological symptoms, what were some of the symptoms? Sweating. Great. Shivering. Brilliant. Okay, you feel nervous, breathing difficulty. You may feel that you're zoning out, blanking out. Great. Increased heartbeat. Brilliant. Yes. So these are some of the physiological symptoms. I'm glad that you all still remember what we saw last time. So yes, so these are some of the physiological symptoms. So whereby you may also feel that your mouth is going dry, your you have difficulty. Someone had mentioned there is the breathing gets a little labored, and then there is shivering, and then the temperature drops. So sometimes you feel that your hands are getting cold, your feet is getting cold. Yes, sometimes skin burn also you may feel. Goosebumps, goose flesh. We saw some of those symptoms in Bhagavad Gita also, where Arjuna reports those physiological symptoms of anxiety. And then you may sometimes feel your heart is squeezing, something, you may feel stuffy, uneasy, and you may sometimes feel that your joints are getting numb, and your muscles, stomach muscles are twisting. Some people even feel nauseous when they get very anxious, and especially if you have had a full meal and after that you are getting, this anxiety, then it reads, some people really sometimes even vomit, to that extent, because we saw how anxiety, our body, in order to conserve energy, it sometimes withdraws, sending energy to certain systems in our body, and digestion is one of those. So which is why you may sometimes feel nauseous. Okay, so these were some of the symptoms of anxiety. And then we saw how anxiety is different from fear. So how is that? How is anxiety? Is anxiety and fear same, or are they different? Yes, it's different. It's different. Great. So how is it different? So fear versus anxiety is brilliant. Reality versus expectations. Absolutely. Brilliant, Vaishnavi. I'm happy. So, all right. Uh, yeah. So uh, that is how anxiety is different from fear. So fear, the threat is real. So there is actually something bad that is going to happen, which is why you start feeling nervous, you start getting tensed. Whereas anxiety is more imagined. So I had mentioned, no, that you would be visualizing different situations. So anxiety comes when you imagine certain things. So the difference is, between anxiety and fear, is that of imagined or perceived threat versus real threat or real danger. Okay. And then we saw some of the factors which results in anxiety. So some of those factors could be, you may have had some trauma in the past, a very bad experience. Let's say you may have gone on stage and had some recitation competition, but then you may have forgotten something there, and that may remain as a trauma experience. So some very painful experiences, or as a child, you may have encountered so many teachers who could have been very strict with you, who would have been verbally or physically abusive with you. So during my times and all, we had teachers who would hit us, giving corporal punishments. So now only corporal punishments has become, I mean, it's condemnable, but back then corporal punishments were common. So for some people that could be very traumatizing. So what happens is, as a result of that, they may start fearing any authority figure. It need not necessarily just be that one particular teacher. So the anxiety can generalize to other teachers also. It can generalize to principals, principal, vice principal, and it can also generalize to other authority figures, like parents or superiors or seniors. So, yes, trauma can sometimes trigger anxiety. A very critical family environment sometimes can trigger anxiety, because you may constantly be uh, reprimanded or found faults with. So, as a result of which you get scared of making mistakes. So there is always that sense of apprehension. What if I do something wrong? And doing something wrong is seen as a crime, or it is seen as something bad. So again, when you come from such a critical family environment, then that can also result in an anxious temperament. And then sometimes being in toxic relationships, this is something I've observed newly. But then yes, this also can result in anxiety, because being with toxic people, you may find yourself constantly walking on eggshells, so that can also result in anxiety. And sometimes stress regarding work, or stress regarding responsibilities at home, or stress about future. All of these could result in, some of these are factors which could result in anxiety. And then we saw some of the practical steps to deal with anxiety. So can you mention Like in one word, what are those practical steps? Like 4 steps we had seen last time. So what are those steps? Start from being attentive to the present moment. Okay. Taking a deep breath, grounding yourself. Brilliant. Oh wow, you have gone even into the details. Great. So what to do to ground yourself? Yes. So first was the grounding exercise that we did, and the reason why we were seeing about these grounding activities was because we saw that anxiety, as we had already seen in these symptoms, is very physiological also, as much as it is mental and emotional. It is also physiological. It affects our body functions. So which is why working on our physiology can help us. So that is like the bottom up process. So you're starting from your senses, from your body, from your physiology, and directly you are getting higher and higher, uh, going and working in your cognitions, in your thoughts. So what we had seen was nervous system has two parts to it. So one is the sympathetic nervous system, which is the part responsible for alerting you, activating when there is some stress happening. So it basically is that alert, this one, nervous system, it alerts you. And parasympathetic is the nervous system which calms you down, which relaxes. Okay, so we had seen the part of nervous system which you train. That is the part which gets stronger. So when we train the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that calming and relaxing, which has that function, then we would be able to manage anxiety better. So we had seen how unhealthy nervous system sees threats everywhere. So constantly you feel worried, anxious, or worked up, and this would result in periodic exhaustion. You may feel like you're crashing, and because your body is constantly stuck in that high alert mode. So that is where grounding activities can help. And Sri Priya had mentioned what that grounding activity is. And we had also seen how sometimes visiting temple or worshipping, having and setting up an altar at home, all of these. So basically the process of archana, that is one of the 9 processes of devotional service. So the process of archana can also help us ground with the here and now. So uh, by decorating your deities, that gives us that visual stimulus, and then decorating them with flowers, fragrant flowers, incense sticks, and then tulsi leaves. So that adds to that olfactory, it gives us that olfactory stimulation. And then having some audio on kirtan or chanting, so that can be an auditory stimulus. So in that way, deity worship in itself becomes a therapeutic tool. And then the next which we saw was, so I'll kind of go through a little quickly because we're kind of running short of time. Uh, so next is creating safe space. So anxiety usually arises when you perceive threat, when you imagine there is a threat happening. So we would try to do something that is opposite of perceiving threat. So that is perceived safety. So we ask ourselves at this given moment, am I 100% safe? Which is for most of us, yes. Because if we are not 100% safe at this moment, then we should probably address the threat in our environment in the here and now, and then you can come back and join the session. So whatever danger is there, that needs to be addressed. But anxiety happens when we only perceive threat, when there is no actual threat. So we try to create a safe space where we give ourselves the affirmations that in the here and now we are safe. And we also create a space at home, create a room, or it can even be your altar, from where you get rid of things that may trigger your anxiety. so that you feel safe being there in such a space. So next was cognitive diffusion. So one thing we notice is that when you get anxious, you start overthinking. And as a result of this, what happens is this goes on like a cycle. So you get anxious, you start thinking, and you kind of fuse yourself with your thoughts. You identify yourself with your thoughts. You start thinking that your thoughts, which is basically different possibilities of threats, you start thinking that it is actually real. You start believing in them. So cognitive diffusion is where you try to separate yourself from the thoughts. You don't let your unhealthy thoughts run the show. And we had seen how we could go ahead with doing that. And finally, seeking help from experts. So it can be, it could be seeking professional help, or seeking help from mentors. So professional help as in some psychological help from counseling psychologists or psychotherapists. So professionals working in the field, they would help you work on your core wounds. And you can also seek help from your spiritual mentors or guides. Okay, so this was the recap. Next slide. Okay, so we would see about the next thing that we are seeing is neuroplasticity. Now, what is neuroplasticity? So neuroplasticity is basically the ability of your brain to rewire itself. So we know that brain is made of neurons. So many of these neurons are connected with each other. They are interconnected. So when we learn something new, or when we try to grasp or internalize something, what happens is the brain, the physical structure of the brain actually changes. So that is, so that way it is plastic. So what happens is new neural connections start getting formed in order to accommodate what you are learning. So initially people used to think that, you know, the development of brain stops right in childhood, but now research shows that that is not the case, that brain continues to develop throughout our life. Now, this neuroplasticity has a role to play in anxiety. So what happens is the way we think changes the structure of our brain. So which is why in professional setup, if you see in counseling and all, what happens is this therapist sometimes helps the client to work on their thought process. So they would consciously, there is a technique called cognitive restructuring. So whereby they would try to, I mean, cutting long story short, whatever thoughts are toxic or are unhealthy to the client, the therapist would challenge those thoughts, and they would facilitate the client to develop alternate set of thoughts which could be more neutral or which could be helpful or healthier. So that way they train the client to think, develop an alternative perspective, start thinking differently. So yes, so brain plays an important role. So which is why here brain plays an important role in reinforcing anxiety. So what can I do in order to deal with this anxiety? So first you need to know what anxiety is. So anxiety, as I see it, is two. So one is ordered anxiety and second is disordered anxiety. So ordered is where it serves you a purpose. So as I had mentioned, anxiety is not bad. It has a purpose to serve. You know, it protects us from threat. Otherwise, we may actually fall in danger. We may become an easy prey to any dangerous situation or a dangerous person. So anxiety has a function to serve, but the anxiety that we are trying to deal with is the disordered anxiety. So now what type of anxiety would I call as disorder? So there are two things. So one, when you perceive threat even when you are safe, so that is one instance where we can say that the anxiety is disordered. And the second instance is where your anxiety interferes with your ability to function. So now you may become so anxious that you may start avoiding school, maybe fearing that teacher or that strict teacher or classmates, or sometimes avoiding going to work, or you may even stop leaving home altogether, and you may stop spending time with your friends. And some people, if they have had some trauma in relationships, let's say they were very intimately associated with somebody, but then they betrayed them. So now what happens is that can leave a very deep emotional scar. So as a result of this, they may start generalizing that wound to everything else. They may start fearing, getting intimate with anyone, because they may again fear that they may have to relive that wound again. They have to relive a betrayal again. So what happens? They may sometimes avoid intimacy. They may become emotionally distant, or they may not want to commit to anything, probably because they fear failure. So this is how sometimes anxiety takes over our life. So that is when we can say anxiety is disordered. So it is maladaptive, it is not helping us. Uh, so first is we need to understand that. So what is anxiety, what is ordered and disordered, and then the anxiety cycle. So anxiety cycle, how it happens, how it goes about, is that especially in the case of disordered anxiety. So first, you perceive a situation as threat. You see it as danger. Now, all of us have different ways of interpreting things. So when something is happening, I either interpret it as something safe or neutral, or I may perceive it as threatening. So now, if I am perceiving it as something dangerous, something threatening, next what happens is I may want to escape or avoid it. So when I escape or avoid that threat or that situation, the third step that happens is relief. So your brain releases that surge of relief that, thank God nothing bad has happened. So there is a situation which you're perceiving as threat. You escape or avoid it. So that situation may actually not be threatening, but still, because you are perceiving it as threatening, you come out of that situation, you escape, you avoid, and then your brain, that there is a relief you experience, that thank God nothing bad has happened. You have escaped. You are safe because you escaped, because you avoided. So what this does is it'll reinforce the brain to increase the anxiety response, that let's do this again in future. So if we ever come across a person, if I ever come across another teacher, so just because I have had a bad experience with teachers, I have been punished or I have been beaten by teacher, now if my anxiety is disordered, the next time I see any teacher, I may fear talking to them, I may fear going and asking doubts to them, so that affects the student teacher dynamics. So now that is how the disordered anxiety may work. So your brain increases the anxiety so that you would do that again. And what this avoidance does is it feeds the disordered anxiety. So this cycle kind of keeps going on. So which is where we take some of those measures, as in working with our thoughts, working with our physiology, working with our emotions, which would help us, kind of rewire our brain to, stop having these triggers, these anxiety triggers. So we are basically training our brain to overcome anxiety. So that is how neuroplasticity works. Okay, fine. The next slide. Okay. So now this is another activity that you can do to deal with your anxiety. So this is called Locus of Control. So I'll just tell you the colors I have shaded. So the first one is light green, the middle one is dark green, and the third one is light blue. Okay. So what basically locus of control is, it refers to the areas that you can and you cannot control. So now here I have taken the example of COVID pandemic, that there is now Omicron is on the race. Uh, yeah. So now that may generate anxiety in many people, that there is a sudden increase in the number of cases, and in fact a lot of cases are going unreported. So in some people this may generate anxiety. They may start getting very worried, they may start getting tensed. So now in locus of control, what we are basically doing is we are putting things on pen and paper. We are kind of making things explicit. So all our worries and anxiety, it's implicit in our mind. So it is there inside our mind. So by doing this activity, what I'm doing is I'm making it explicit. I'm making it more visible, apparent, what my fears are or what my thoughts are. So sometimes when you're doing this activity, you may actually feel some sense of relief. So this is one technique which you can try. So what you do is you draw two circles such way in a way that they overlap each other. So one section is that which is in my control, and then the other section is that which is out of my control. So now, and then the area in the middle is the realm of influence. So I'll tell you what each of these mean. So those things which are in my control, as you know, basically refer to those steps which I can take, which are in my control. So first is now I can inform and educate myself about what this new variant of COVID is. How does that affect people? Second is I can take precautions. So I can wear mask. I can social distance myself. Or if I see that my friends or family, they are suffering, then I can offer some support to them. Uh, and I can also focus on improving my overall health. So overall health would be diet or exercise or sleep. So that helps build immunity. So these are certain things which is in my control. So I can do these things. These are doables. Second, those that are out of my control is the activities which others do. So whether they wear mask or whether or are they following any of the COVID protocols, social distancing or sanitizing, or are they avoiding crowded places, or are they going to that? There are so many people who are still traveling even at this time, though there is so much spreading. So now that is not in my control. Next is the spreading of corona. Again, that is not in my control. The virus is spreading and there is no stopping it. And neither do I have any control over its impact on my health. So it could be impact on my health or the health of others. And then I may not be able to control the death rate. So we had seen the 2020, that COVID-19 variant. I think that was a lot more dangerous, and the death rates were on the raise. And a lot of us were feeling very, very anxious. So again, the death rates is not something that is in my control. Next is when the lockdown happens. So that is also not in my control. The measures which government takes to control pandemic, again, that is not in my control. So when I put this down, I am able to visually separate what are the steps which I can take and what are the steps which I cannot take. There are still certain things which I can do that may influence the outcome, which may influence, the points in the blue section. So that is called realm of influence. So I may use social media to create awareness. So when I create awareness, so I had seen several people using WhatsApp. So they would post, certain photos whereby they try to create awareness, asking people to stay at home. And then showing some statistics that this is on the race, so many people are affected, so please stay at home. So sometimes we can use social media as a means to create awareness, so that will influence the outcome, that will influence others' actions, but that will not control their actions. That is again very important to note. So we may influence, but we may not control. Next would be I'm myself staying at home, so I'm contributing to avoiding the cycle of spread. Uh, I may avoid crowded places. And then, since we had spoken about government, so I may choose to vote certain people. So that may influence, again, it will not control what that government would do, what steps they will take. It will just influence. Okay. And this is a very general example. This can actually be applicable in any cases. So it can be in terms of relationships also. So you may have, you may be constantly in a conflicting relationship with a certain person. So this locus of control can apply there also. So that there are certain things only which are in your control. And there are certain things which are not. There are certain things which you can do that will influence them, influence their reaction. Now, their reaction is something that is not in our control, that is out of my control. However, I may do certain things which may influence their reaction, but it will still not control it. So that is important to know. So this is how locus of control actually helps us develop that clarity on what I can act on and what I cannot act on. So that way, that uncertainty, which is a very key element in anxiety, it helps us get rid of that uncertainty. And next, you would also be able to put your focus and efforts on the process. So you may see me mentioning it in the bottom. So the whole section, the whole segment of in my control, including the realm of influence, that comes under process. And what is out of control is the outcome. So what's happening here is you will be able to focus more of your attention and efforts on the process instead of the outcome. So you will be able to distance yourself, kind of detach yourself from the outcome. So that way you're not carrying additional burden, of things you're not able to control. Because a lot of times anxiety happens when you feel that things are going out of your control. You start getting worried, you start getting worked up that nothing is going your way. So this locus of control activity may help. It will help you segregate things which are in your control and that which is not in your control. So that will help us calm down a bit. Okay. So again, locus of control, we will see how devotees can apply it. So first, devotional service really helps us give a better perspective to this activity. So firstly, the position of being a devotee, being a servant of Krishna, we understand that's an extremely secure position. So that's like the safe haven, a very safe position to be in. And we know that servants of Krishna, they know their sphere of influence. They know their, as servants, we all are parts and parcels of Krishna. And as part and parcel, we have something called free will. So free will is we still have some independence. So I am still able to take certain decisions. I still have some level of control. But devotees understand that their sphere of influence is limited. So I am only a part and parcel of Krishna. Krishna is the whole, and he is the supreme controller. I am only a part of that whole. So thereby, I also can control, like how Krishna is controlling. But it's just that my sphere of control is limited because I am just a part. So what devotees do is they play the part of the part. So they don't try to play the part of the whole. So they don't try to control everything that's happening around them. They try to control what is in their control, and what is out of our control, devotees realize, is in Krishna's control. So that is an added perspective which a devotee has. So we understand that though something may not be in my control, there are things which are out of my control. What is out of my control is in Krishna's control. So Krishna still has the charge. He has the power over situations which I can't handle. So thereby, when I develop that attachment, when I develop that faith towards Krishna, I gradually start to detach myself from things which are not in my control. So, thereby, it helps us stabilize our disturbed state of mind. So, in this case, I would like to, so locus of control. Okay, can you go to the next slide? Next, next. Yeah. So we can see how scriptures also help us here. So this is the verse from Ishopanishad. So whereby, we can read what this verse has to say. So Ishopanishad first verse. So everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. Now, doesn't that give us a huge sense of relief that, okay, even if it is not in my control, it is in Krishna's control. Okay, it's in safe hands. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So this was, to me, the one takeaway I would like you to have is the first point, since we are speaking of this in context to managing anxiety. So everything animate or inanimate that is within this universe is controlled and owned by Krishna. So that is one important thing. Next slide. Okay. So this is another verse from Bhagavad Gita, verse chapter 2, verse 47. So you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of the action. So fruits here again refer to outcome. Uh, Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to to not doing your work. So I hope you have drawn that circle, because now I'll just be speaking. We may not be able to shift slides back to that diagram. So I hope you have taken note of it, or at least you remember. So when I'm speaking using terms, you may be able to relate. So here we can see that prescribed duty is basically the process, what is in my control. So Krishna is saying here that I have the right to do what is in my control. However, never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities. So sometimes the outcome, I am always not the cause of the outcome. Sometimes how another person responds or reacts to me or reacts to my words or actions is not because of me, it's because of them. Sometimes they have some unfinished business, they have some problems innate in them, and as a result of which they react or respond in certain ways which is not in my control. So sometimes I am not the cause of the result or the outcome of my activities. There are several other factors, several other uh, you know uh, things coming in play. So that is the second thing. So again, this kind of helps us detach ourselves from the outcome. Next is a verse from Bhagavatam. So now I was speaking about detachment. So detachment in itself may seem a little difficult to do, but that is what takes us to the this verse of Bhagavatam. So, by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires costless knowledge and detachment from the world. So, this was what I was trying to hint at. So, detachment, when devotees are practicing detachment, it is not just a very dry form of indifference. It is rather something that is coming from their attachment towards Krishna. So, because they have a higher taste, a higher attachment, they are very naturally able to disconnect and detach themselves from things that are not in their control. Okay. Next slide. So that's how devotional service helps us, in this activity of locus of control, which helps us manage anxiety. Okay. So this is another verse again, which highlights that the Lord is the one who owns everything that is there in this creation. Nothing is out of his control. Nothing acts independently of the Lord. So this is a verse from Bhagavad Gita again. Yet in this body, there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the super soul. And finally, uh, we are seeing about the nature of the Lord. So I have been saying that we perform devotional service to the Lord, we develop attachment to the Lord, that Lord is the controller of everything. But then, what is the nature of that Lord? So, who is that Lord? How is He? What is His disposition towards other living entities, towards all of us? So that takes us to the this verse of Bhagavad Gita. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. So that is the predisposition Lord has towards all of us. So he is our benefactor and our well-wisher. So to put things in perspective, I'll finish reading this. Attains peace. So peace from pangs of material misery. So Krishna has already given the peace formula here. So he has mentioned how he is the well-wisher, he is the benefactor. So the moment the Lord tells that, we develop this sense of security being with the Lord. Okay, so now that I'm taking shelter of the Lord, I am surrendering unto him, requesting him to take charge of things which is not in my control. I know that I am offering myself to someone, to safe hands. So the Lord is my well-wisher. The Lord loves me. The love which Lord has for us is unconditional. So you basically know that you are in safe hands. So how does it feel when you, I mean, recall back in the past? So when you used to go to school first time, probably in your pre-KG, when you're leaving your parents and stepping inside the school, it may have been you, or you may have noticed other students doing this, that they would be crying so much, they would not want to leave their parent. Reason being, they don't feel safe leaving the shelter of their parent and entering into a new space, a very strange environment. And the moment they come out of the school, like the school time gets over and they come out, they actually feel that sense of relief that they are meeting their parents once again, because they know that they are in the safe hands. When they are with their parents, they are safe and secure. So that is the relationship we have with the Lord. So which is why I highlighted that the Lord is our benefactor and well-wisher. So therefore, by surrendering ourselves unto him, we would be able to experience a greater sense of security, and the anxiety becomes manageable. So even if you are not able to fully overcome anxiety, even you may still have some level of anxiety, but that becomes manageable. Next slide. Yes. However, sometimes, despite all our endeavors, sometimes despite all the efforts that we take, we may see that certain situations are just not going the way I want them to go. No matter how much efforts I take, things are still going out of my control. So you may sometimes feel so hopeless, so helpless. Is there something I can do even in that situation? So what is my locus of control there? So everything seems external now. So it's all outside, out of my control. Is there anything which I can do? Yes, as devotees, there is still something that is in our locus of control, and that is our consciousness. So we still have control over our consciousness, our sense of awareness, and we can surrender that consciousness to Krishna. So, which is what it means to be Krishna conscious. Okay, next slide. Yes, so these are some of the examples of locus of control in devotees. So, how in case of Arjuna, I was actually thinking of making this a little interactive, but okay. Yeah. So Arjuna. So in this case, we see that his emotions were going out of control. His thoughts were going. His state of mind was going out of control. He was getting very disturbed. So at that point of time, when things were going out of control, we see what Arjuna did. Arjuna expressed his vulnerability to Krishna and he surrendered unto Krishna. So he accepted Krishna as his teacher, uh, requesting him to guide Arjuna. So thereby surrendering their consciousness, surrendering themselves to Krishna. So, and we know what the outcome of that surrender was. So Arjuna was able to come out of that anxiety. Arjuna was able to be more rational, and he was able to fight the war with more rigor and emerge victorious. So next again is in the case of Draupadi. So we see how you know disrobing her, how so many things were actually out of her control. So uh, her husband's betting on her, again that was not done with her permission, so that was out of her control. The fact that Duryodhan said that she needs to be disrobed, again that was out of her control. She requested all the elder members in the assembly to protect her, again them not being able to offer protection, that was also out of her control. And then her strength was also very limited, so she tried her best. So she tried to hold back her sari, not let it go when Dushasana was dragging it out. But then she realized that her locus of control was very limited, her strength was very limited, and then eventually she surrendered unto the Lord. So again, surrendering their consciousness. So still in that situation, there was something that she could do, which was surrendering, and we know what happened once she surrendered. The Lord came and protected her personally. Next slide. Yes. So this is another instance. So this pastime is Gajendra Moksha. So we know that Gajendra was an elephant, and in fact, in his previous life, he was actually a devotee. His name was Indradyumna. He was from South India, and he was actually cursed, which is why he was born as an elephant. And we know that once when he was having a good time with his family, with so many she elephants and with other family members, other elephants, he was having a good time in the lake, which was filled with so many lotuses. But then the crocodile in the lake got very agitated. It got very angry, and it attacked Gajendra. So it caught its legs, and Gajendra was obviously quite strong, so he tried pulling it out, and this pulling from both sides was happening for almost 1,000 years. So the crocodile was also trying to pull Gajendra in, and Gajendra was trying to pull himself out. So the struggle went on, this fight went on for 1,000 years, and actually the demigods were looking at this, with so much interest. But we know that crocodile was the animal of the lake, so the lake is its home ground. So we have seen this in crickets also. I mean, when we play cricket also, that when there is India, Pakistan, or any other country playing. So usually when they play in their home ground, the chances of them winning is very high. So that was the case with the crocodile also. And when Gajendra started understanding that he was not having control over this anymore, he started getting anxious that he may lose his life. So which is when he starts offering prayers to the Lord. So as I had mentioned, he was a devotee in his previous life. So correctly at that moment of danger, he recalls all the prayers which he had, recited in his previous life, and he had learned in his previous life. So he starts offering all those prayers to the Lord. But interestingly, what he does is he only offers prayers to the supreme controller. He does not even take the name, whether it is Vishnu, Narayana. So he doesn't take the name. So what happens is, he doesn't take the name of any demigod, this demigod or that demigod. It's just supreme controller. So no demigod comes forward because their name was not taken. However, Lord Narayana, he understands that Gajendra is already in an awkward position at this moment, expecting him to remember, to the T, that he should call out my name Narayana, uh, may not be very practical. So the Lord understands his awkward position, and he himself comes. He immediately comes on his carrier Garuda. And the moment the Lord reaches the spot, the Lord comes along with the other demigods also. The demigods follow the Lord. In fact, the demigods were kind of offended with Gajendra because they did not think of him. But then they realized later that that was offensive because Gajendra was also a devotee. And they apologize for the same. So the moment the Lord reaches the spot, Gajendra immediately picks up a lotus from the lake, and he starts offering prayers to the Lord. The Lord immediately gets down from Garuda, and he pulls Gajendra out of the lake. And as he was pulled out, obviously the crocodile was having its jaws stuck on the feet of Gajendra. So the Lord, with his Sudarshan Chakra, he cuts off the crocodile's head. And interestingly, crocodile was also a Gandharva who was cursed in the past. So both of them that way get liberated. So Gajendra also attains moksha, and Gandharva also attains his real form. So again, we see in a position where Gajendra was helpless, where he tried everything but nothing worked, he surrendered his consciousness to the Supreme Lord. And again, locus of control. There are things which are not in our control at all. So the next is the case of Ambarish Maharaj. So Ambarish Maharaj, I think again, many of you may be knowing what that pastime is. So, once Durvasa Muni, he goes to Ambarish, he visits Ambarish Maharaj, and then it was time to break the fast. So what happens is, Durvasa Muni, he goes to lake to have a bath, but then the time for breaking fast would be running away. So which is why the king Ambarish Maharaj, after having consultation with few saints, he breaks his fast with water. So breaking fast with water, it's kind of a very unique position because it's neither considered as broken and not broken. So it's like you have also broken the fast, but you have also not broken the fast. But the moment Durvasa Muni listens to this, he gets very offended, and he curses. He makes a demon out of a strand of his hair in order to attack Ambarish Maharaj. And the moment, and we know that Ambarish Maharaj always has his consciousness surrendered to the Lord. So the moment the Lord sees that Durvasa Muni is committing such an offense, he destroys that demon, and he sends Sudarshan Chakra, which keeps running behind Durvasa Muni. And then finally we see how Durvasa Muni, he takes shelter of Ambarish Maharaj. And finally, Ambarish Maharaj forgives him, and the Sudarshan Chakra stops following Ambarish Maharaj. So again, things sometimes, unexpected things happen. There are so many things out of our control. Ambarish Maharaj did not expect that, despite being very hospitable to Durvasa Muni, he would actually attack himself. So I mean, if anybody else were in that position, they would have been like, I am serving you, I am being so hospitable to you, how dare do you try to offend me? If you know to curse me, I'll also curse you. But then we see Ambarish Maharaj was not like that. So Ambarish Maharaj, he remained calm, he remained stable, because he was equipoised. He knew that there are things which happen out of our control, and those which are out of our control, the Lord takes charge of it when we surrender unto the Lord. Next slide. Okay. So again, Govardhan Leela. Again, the Brajvasis, they did not have, who would have, anticipated that Indra would get so angry, so offended that he would send Samvartaka clouds. Those clouds are you're supposed to send them when the universe is getting destroyed. So, Brajvasis did not expect that, Indra would get so angry, and Indra's reaction was not under their control. So that is again out of their control. And we see when Indra started attacking the land of Vrindavan, when it started getting flooded, the houses were all, there were so many trees that were blown away. So it was a very huge rainfall in Vrindavan, very terrifying rainfall with so much thunder and all. And we see the devotees still had something to surrender unto Krishna, and that was themselves, their consciousness. So after taking shelter of Krishna, again we see what the Lord did. The Lord took charge of what was not in their control, and it is the same with the pastime of subduing Kaliya. In fact, we read this pastime during our Sunday reading session. So again, Kaliya coming to the lake of Yamuna was not in the control of Brajvasis. Kaliya toxifying the lake of Yamuna was not in the control of Brajvasis. So what was not in the control of the devotees, the Lord takes control of it. So when the Lord saw that, Kaliya was harming the devotees, then the Lord took it upon himself to drive Kaliya away from that lake. So what is not in our control, what is out of our control, Krishna will take charge. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So this is the last part. So where we see again Parikshit Maharaj. So you can actually read this in Bhagavatam, this pastime in Bhagavatam. So whereby, cutting the long story short, Parikshit Maharaj, once he was very exhausted, so he visits a sage, the hut of a sage, the house of a sage, and the sage would be meditating, and Parikshit Maharaj would get offended, slightly offended that, who's the king of this entire kingdom, I am here, and how is this person not receiving me? How are they ignoring me? But then the saint was meditating. So what Parikshit Maharaj does out of that fatigue and that irritation is he takes the dead body of a snake and he puts it on the neck of that sage. And he leaves that place. But then the son of the sage who was playing at a distance, he notices this and he curses Parikshit Maharaj. So he takes offense of because of Parikshit Maharaj's actions, and he says that in another 7 days you will be killed by a snake named Takshaka. So that is the picture in the right. So where the snake is. So this news comes to the notice of Parikshit Maharaj. Now, if something like that happened to me, then I may have gotten so angry, and then we would have gotten into this, this back and forth heated exchange of curses. We may have taken offense, but then we see that Parikshit Maharaj is so sober. He doesn't get disturbed. In fact, he acknowledges, he welcomes this curse. In fact, Parikshit Maharaj was so noble, he was so powerful that he actually had the ability to revert this curse. So that is, make this curse go inefficient, if effectless. However, he did not do that because he saw that as an arrangement of the Lord. He saw that as something which is not in control, in his control. So therefore, Parikshit Maharaj, he starts taking measures that he can from his end in order to embrace the end that is about to come in 7 days. So he goes out, he takes association of the sages, And finally, in an assembly of such sages, uh, a very, very exalted devotee named Shukadev Goswami, he arrives. So he is the son of Vyasadev. So he arrives in the assembly, and Shukadev Goswami, he surrenders unto, Parikshit Maharaj surrenders unto Shukadev Goswami. He tells him of this entire incident, and he says that he requests Shukadev Goswami to guide him now that his end is nearing. So that is where the whole narration of Bhagavatam starts. So if this curse did not happen, or if Parikshit Maharaj had not accepted this curse and taken this decision, we probably would not be having Bhagavatam today. So again, the devotees do what is in their control, and sometimes when things are completely not in their control, taking shelter of the Lord or taking shelter of his devotees uh, is something that is still always in their control. And we know that anybody who takes shelter of the Lord is not abandoned. So again, that is another verse, a promise Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that he who surrenders unto the Lord does not vanquish him, the Lord does not abandon him. So the Lord offers all protection unto him. Okay, fine. Next slide. Okay. So can you just go back to the previous slide? Yeah. So so with this, the activity of locus of control gets over. So what we are trying to see through this activity, even as a devotee, is that we first take an audit of what are the things in my control, and I own responsibility for those things which are in my control. I acknowledge that there are things which are out of my control, and by higher attachment towards Krishna, I detach myself from those things that uh, I am not able to control. So we take shelter of the Lord, and we let the Lord take charge of those things. We let Lord take charge of the unexpected events that may happen in life, or the outcomes of our actions. So we only take control or take charge of what actions we can exercise control on. And uh, okay, so next slide, next slide. So, so with that, that activity gets over, locus of control. Next, another thing that you can do is changing your relationship with fear, or changing your relationship with anxiety. So the this activity may, you can actually do it when you're free, maybe not now, maybe when you're free. This may be a little uncomfortable, but this is doing this can actually help you on a long run. So what we do here is we first revisit those moments uh, which caused us so much anxiety, which caused us so much fear. It can be anything. It can be your exams, or it can be getting humiliated in front of your classmates, some teacher scolding you, or your parents scolding you. So what are your greatest fears in your past? So you explore those fears, and then the reason we are doing this is because there is something called unfinished business. So unfinished business is something most of us still have. So there are a lot of things which we have not resolved in the past. So unresolved fears, uh, a lot of us may still carry it along with us. So what that does is it triggers the disordered anxiety, the anxiety which is maladaptive, which does not help us. And that way we know how disordered anxiety affects our current state of mind, and our ability to make decisions, and it affects us in debilitating ways. We had seen how we try to avoid social gatherings, we avoid going to work. So it can actually affect in extreme levels. So what we do here is we revisit those past fears, and in doing so, we may actually feel uncomfortable. We may start experiencing, some people may feel suffocated. Some people may relive that those moments. They may actually start panicking again. They may start getting the physiological symptoms of those moments, those difficult moments, fearful moments. But then doing this has a purpose. So when you do it, so you may feel uncomfortable, and as a result of which your mind may actually try to distract you. So it may use certain defense mechanisms and try to avoid thinking about it again. But then we kind of go past these distractions and defense mechanisms of the mind. We kind of sit with us, probably in a meditative mood, try to reflect back in the past and see from a curious stance, a compassionate, non-judgmental stance. So we are talking about you here. So at least you don't judge your own fears. So from a very neutral and curious stance, you start exploring. So what is it that made me so anxious at that point? What is it that triggered so much fear in me? And is there any connection between the fear back in the past and what I'm experiencing at this moment? Now, sometimes I'm just giving this again as an example, but uh, you may be able to relate with it. So we know as children, we experience a lot of pressure to study well and get good marks. So as a result of which we start studying only to please our parents or please our family members, or to have a good image amongst our classmates, or to please our teachers to get a good name from them. And eventually this may actually become a pattern in us where anything I do, anything I accomplish, I only do it to make sure that others perceive me in good light. So others are happy with me. They think of me as the good guy, someone who's very accomplished, who's very talented, who's very intelligent. So anything that I'm accomplishing, it is only out of fear of what if somebody may think something bad of me. So you may actually keep doing things only out of that state of anxiety. Now that anxiety has its, if you trace it back, it has a history in the past. So that is how revisiting your fears in the past can actually help you identify some of the triggers which is happening in the present. And so our current relationship with anxiety is that of avoidance response. So we try to avoid anxiety. So that's usually how, we are kind of hedonistic. So we try to avoid pain, we gravitate towards pleasure. So anxiety is something we perceive as painful. So we try to avoid anxiety. And thereby, in order to avoid anxiety, so many people even do different things to distract themselves from getting anxious. So they may start surfing the net to just get distracted, try to uh, divert their mind away to another topic, so that they stop thinking about what is making them anxious. Now what this diversion does is it may give you a brief relief from your anxiety, but you will ultimately have to come back to your anxiety. You will have to face your fears. So which is why on a longer run that may not help. So that is our current relationship with anxiety. We see anxiety as something bad, as something dangerous. Now we are trying to establish a new relationship with our anxiety. And that relationship is, anxiety is not bad. Anxiety may be uncomfortable, but it is not dangerous. Anxiety does not kill you. So where you start to, I mean, this may seem like an oxymoron, but where you kind of start to make yourself get used to being with anxiety. So of course, it may take some efforts. It may actually not be easy to do in the beginning, and you don't have to overdo it. Uh, Take one step at a time and try to gradually explore your fears. So that way, you will be able to better manage any future anxieties. So by establishing a new relationship with your fear, that fear is not bad, anxiety is not bad, it actually has some purpose to serve. So sometimes it may be uncomfortable, sometimes it may seem unmanageable, but I will start taking certain, measures, certain the smart goals kind of things. So certain measures which would take me a step closer to being comfortable with my anxiety. So even if I'm not completely comfortable, I at least don't run away from anxiety to that level of familiarity with my anxiety. Next slide. Okay. So building a bad to good narrative. So this narrative is where uh, you know you again, this is another activity. So what I would like you to do is uh, think about a moment in your life when you were happy, when something good happened, when something great happened, something that made you experience joy. So I would like you to live in that moment of joy. So again, it could be anything. You may have gotten your new job, so that could be an accomplishment, or you may have been able to pursue your passions. That is another achievement, or you may have gotten some award. So it could be anything. So think about it and be in the joy of experiencing that happy moment. Next, I would want you to look back into the past, back in the timeline, before this happy moment happened. So I'm sure you would have faced a lot of challenges before you got to this happy moment. So you may have failed in several interviews, which may have been very demotivating and discouraging for you. You may have had those moments when you broke down, you know, you may have broken down out of anxiety that, would this be an unending cycle that I don't clear any interview at all. So, so you may have had those painful experiences, and then there would have also been some relatives telling you, why have you not gotten a job yet? So think back at all those memories which were painful before this happy incident happened. Now, what I would want you to do is build a narrative, a story where you see these bad or these challenges, these bad moments, painful memories, or these challenges as something necessary for you to reach this point of being good. Those challenges, you had to cross them in order for that to lead to something good. Now, this narrative can also help you deal with challenges, because in future, when you are again confronted with challenges, or when you are faced with something bad, something painful, you start automatically building this narrative that yes, what is happening with me is bad, and yes, this is making me anxious, but then this bad is a necessary challenge that would result in something good, that would lead to something good. So what happens is, this helps us kind of develop a sense of uh, uh, gratitude towards these challenges which you are experiencing. The example of that is Queen Kunti. So whereby we know that how Pandavas had suffered so much before they gained victory in the battle of Kurukshetra, and they finally got the kingdom which they deserve. And yet when Krishna was about to leave, Kunti prays to the Lord that, she remembers all those moments where they suffered, the Pandavas suffered, where she suffered because of Dhritarashtra and all his entourage, Duryodhana and the Kauravas. She recalls those moments and she prays to the Lord that, in all those difficult moments, you were there with us. But now that those moments are not there with us, you are leaving us. So I would pray to you, O Lord, that may those moments happen again and again to us, so that you will always be there for us. So we see how Kunti has been able to develop this bad to good narrative. uh, I mean, she's very exalted. So she's so exalted that she would she sees good in that bad also, but we may not be able to imitate her, but we can follow in her footsteps. So whereby we see that even in that bad, uh, it even if it may be bad, it has a purpose to serve. In grander scheme of things, this falls in some plan of the Lord, which I may not be able to kind of discern, which I may not be able to identify in the here and now. So when I am suffering, when I am going through that problem, I may not be able to, I may actually eternalize that problem. But what if this situation keeps on going again and again? So, which is where building this back to good narrative that, in the past this has happened. So in the present also this will happen. So good and bad both are temporary in nature. So this bad is something necessary for me to lead to the good. So that is another thing. So this narrative will help you in the future when you are dealing with any bad events, any unprecedented events. It will help you manage that better. So the anxiety when you get at that point becomes a lot more manageable. Next slide. Yeah, so this is the last part. So self-care versus aftercare. So most of what we do is usually aftercare. So aftercare is when some incident happens, I am wounded, I am damaged, and now I am trying to take steps to heal. I'm taking steps to recover. While that is good, that is definitely necessary, we sometimes fail to engage in self-care, which is something that happens before the damage. So what self-care basically does is it helps us build that immunity. It helps us build those muscles, those psychological muscles to handle challenges more efficiently. Because when self-care is happening, you're actually preparing yourself to face any possible threat or danger in future. So it is like, when you are physically healthy, you have a good lifestyle in terms of diet or sleep or you know engaging in physical activity. So what happens is that automatically builds physical resilience, that builds immunity. It enhances your immune strength, and in future if you even get any diseases, your body would be able to fight it with greater vigor. So that is the same with our emotional problems also. It's the same with our psychological issues also. So when we engage in self-care, it helps build that resilience. And in fact, research has shown that self-care actually reduces anxiety, it reduces stress, it helps dealing with burnout and depression. It also strengthens relationships. So these are some of the benefits of self-care, and you may start making it a habit to engage in any self-care activity. So self-care activity, one could be the lifestyle changes. Second is taking association. So having a good social network, social connection, that also enhances the sense of security. So you feel cared for in a healthy environment, in a healthy social environment. So devotee circle can definitely help there. And then try to I mean, these are certain ideas, but you can always explore and search more. So another self-care activity could be, you may always try to make it a habit of learning something new every day. So that way, when you learn so many things, at least one new thing every day. So that way, something of what you have learned may come in handy when you're faced with challenges. And another self-care activity would be going back into your past, doing, finishing those unfinished business, so which I had mentioned before. So trying to deal with those unresolved fears. So once you resolve that as a part of your self-care regime, then again, when you're confronted with future, any future challenges, you will be able to handle it with greater ease. So these are some self-care activities which and some meditating definitely helps. Reflection and introspection, journaling can also help, so whereby you write down your emotions, so you're making the implicit explicit. So that also helps. So it helps, uh, you know increase awareness about your inner environment, because you're making what is inside, because sometimes when it is only inside, it may not be clear, it may be very cloudy. So when you journal it out, when you write down your feelings, then what happens is you're able to know what is running inside your mind, so that increases self awareness. So that will also help you know what are the areas you have issues in and where you can work on. So these are some self-care activities which you can do. So I think with that, I'll end today's session. I'm sorry, I think it went. Thank you very much for staying back till the end. So, Hare Krishna. So can I take questions, or are we wrapping up? Hare Krishna. Okay, so I think session was helpful. Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Akriti. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Surabhi. Thank you, Kundavidya Mataji. Thank you very much. Okay. So I think if you have any questions, then maybe I think you can write to the mail ID. Thank you, Pooja. So you can write to the IYS mail ID. So we will respond there, because I think it's already a little too late today. So you can send it through mail, and we'll definitely respond to your questions. Thank you, Dimple. Thank you, Abhilash. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. So thank you all for joining today. Take care. Hope you're all safe. Stay safe, and take care of yourself. Thank you, Kirtana. Hare Krishna. Take care.